Let's go live to Melbourne, and Jamie Hyams joins me from the Australia-Israel Jewish Affairs Council, AIJAC, as it's known. Jamie, thanks for your time. What do you say to the criticisms, obviously not from Nikki Haley, but others around the Security Council table and around the world that say that this was not a proportionate use of force, with 60 dead now in those protests in Gaza?
Well, I think it shows a lack of understanding of what Israel's actually up against, and a lack of understanding of what proportionality really means. I mean, Israel, you know, the loss of life, any life, and especially civilian life, is tragic, and Israel doesn't want that to happen. But the fact is, it was put in a really invidious position by Hamas, because Hamas was really doing is, under the cover of these, what they were trying to protest, they were trying to breach Israel's border fence. And there were coordinated messages on social media that were going around to the protesters yesterday saying, you know, hide your weapons, breach the fence, our Hamas forces will come through the fence behind you, and only let your weapon be seen when you find an Israeli civilian or an Israeli soldier. And then we're going to try and kill as many of them as we can and kidnap others. So what Israel was really doing was defending its civilians. So you talk about proportionality, and people seem to think that proportionality means that you need to have equal dead on both sides, but that's not what proportionality means. Proportionality means that you need to identify a legitimate military goal, and then you can use force proportionate to achieve the goal. Now, Israel's legitimate military goal is to stop its border being breached by what amounts to terrorist invaders, and then it's entitled to do what it needs to do to stop that happening. And you know, when
and including the use of sniper fire that obviously was used in that violence yesterday, and hitting some of these protesters, or terrorists as you characterise them. Not all of them would have been terrorists, but hitting some of these protesters with sniper fire and behind the fence.
Yeah, because what Israel had to do was to stop the fence being reached and being breached, because there were Palestinians with explosives who were trying to blow up the fence, and then mass breaches in different positions yesterday. So it was a coordinated attempt to get into Israel, and Hamas has this incredibly cynical and very, very sad calculus, where if they manage to achieve their aims and kill Israelis, they win. But if they force Israelis to kill Palestinian civilians, they also win, because it gives Israel a bad reputation. And in fact, there was one Hamas leader called Khalid Haya who said, you know, we have shown the world today that we have lured the enemy to firing on our peaceful protesters. So, you know, that is the aim, to actually try and engage Israel so that Israel does have to kill Palestinians. It's very, very sad.
In your view, was it purely about the Nakba, as they call it, to the Palestinians, which they mark on the anniversary of the creation of the State of Israel, because they see it as their loss of their homeland? The Nakba refers to that. Has that been exacerbated this year by the fact that Donald Trump has formalised that move of the US Embassy to Jerusalem?
Look, I think that's a useful excuse for Hamas, but that's not the reason, though. And when you look at the history of Hamas, you know, it goes back for 30 years now, suicide bombings, missiles. You know, the reason Hamas commits violence against Israel is purely and simply because Israel exists, and the rest is just an excuse. And, you know, they tried the suicide bombings. Israel found a way to stop those. So then they tried missiles from Gaza and Israel with Iron Dome and so on, found a way to stop those. So this is just the latest tactic. And if it wasn't for, you know, the moving of the American embassy, then it would be something else. You know, so it's just an excuse. But, you know, Donald Trump has really done the right thing by acknowledging Jerusalem is Israel's capital and moving the embassy there. He specifically said in his statement when he announced the move that it did not preclude in any way the Palestinians also having a capital in East Jerusalem. So it's just an excuse. It's not a legitimate reason.
When you look back at this, Jamie Hyams, as someone who obviously watches this issue so as closely as you do, would you concede that it would have been a much better option for Israel in terms of the perception of that democracy around the world, in terms of the use of force, if it had not seen 60 people killed over the last 24 hours? Well,
I think the alternative, look, is Israel has no interest in killing Palestinian civilians for the obvious reasons, you know, so it only does it as a last resort. And I think the alternative, which would have been to sit back and allow hundreds of Palestinians to breach the border. And you need to bear in mind that there are thousands of Israelis that live within a kilometre of that Gaza border in peaceful communities.
Yeah.
And to risk allowing, Hamas basically death squads to infiltrate those communities is far worse. And the ultimate, outcome would have been probably casualties on Israel's side, but probably would have been more fatalities on the Palestinian side as well, because once the fence was breached, then Israel would have had to do whatever it could to stop, thousands of people running through it. So,
Jamie Hyams from the Australia-Israel Jewish Affairs Council, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for that. And after a terrible couple of days, no doubt, for that part of the world, I appreciate your thoughts on that. Let's go live.